Been watching ball with my big old brain and think the tape needs some explaining. Studying the stats to understand it. Hey, yo. Talk data to me. Talk data to me.
Welcome to episode 7. I can't believe it's already episode 7 of Talk Data to Me. And man, do we have a special guest for you guys today. I know you guys are coming to me sometimes and you're like, man, does this guy even watch the games? Is he looking at anything? And for the record, guys, I do go back and watch. I can't watch every play from every player, but I do try to watch a lot of these players every single week. But you know what? I am not an expert in that field, and I am happy to tell you that. But I have been trying to learn from someone who I think is very good at that and has been doing it for a very long time. And that is none other than Matt Waldman from the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, an amazing piece of work. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, you got to be sure to do so. And just one other quick tidbit. I may be slightly biased, I'll admit it, but Matt gave me my first opportunity in the fantasy football space. Fighting Chance Fantasy, I was doing some things there, and Matt also gave me an opportunity to come in and start talking some data along with film. We were doing film versus data reviews, Matt, before it was cool. I remember some of our shows, we might have went for 2 to 3 hours. We'll try to keep it, guys, today to under an hour and a half. Sometimes Matt and I get going, though, and we have a lot of fun. We both have a goal today, but no guarantees. I'm just going to put that out there right now. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing great. Quite an introduction, but it's a pleasure always to, as you know, Dwayne, to chop it up with you. And I remember seeing your work and thinking I would be nuts not to have you doing stuff on my site. And I knew it wasn't going to be for very long. So I knew you'd be going on and doing the things you're doing. So
well, if you think you're off the hook yet with my intro to you, you're wrong. Yeah, you thought the intro was good, but I did go to our AI partner. I do this every week, and I asked Perplexity, is Matt Waldman a good film evaluator? And this is what Perplexity had to say to you. You're safe right now. If the robots decide to take over tomorrow, they do like you, Matt. They're not going to be coming Terminator style for your life. Matt Waldman is regarded as a highly detailed and passionate film evaluator. Highly detailed is probably an understatement. I think the thing I love most about your work, Matt, is the process and how you're constantly tweaking the process. And when we talk film and data, you are very meticulous about the way you track data as well. And you are charting these things. You've been recording them for years. You're looking at what things have mattered for running backs and receivers and tight ends, quarterbacks, all the main skill positions of the NFL. And you're also always thinking about, okay, when you think about improving it, what are the things, right, that might be most important to these positions? What are things that are probably more periphery or things that they can improve at the next level? And, when Perplexity AI looks at your reputation and evaluation style, says this, Waldman's process is widely praised for its transparency and depth. He documents his methodology in detail, allowing readers to replicate or scrutinize his evaluations. And again, I thought that hit the nail on the head, man. I just absolutely love the transparency that you provide in your process. So major hat tip to you on that front.
Well, I appreciate it. And I'm glad, if they come for me, I just, like I said before the show, my dog knows how to find the wires and choose them. So
your dog is an expert at chewing through wires.
he's an expert at finding the wires. He doesn't do it. He doesn't do it at this station. He knows where the bread is buttered. But yes, he's an expert at that.
Well, we're going to start off, and every week I do this with kind of a zinger to you, and I'm going to force you to narrow something down. And I hate it when people do. I don't hate it when people do this to me, but I'm always trying to think if I were to put this all in a nutshell, how do I really get there and what are the most critical components? And so I'm going to start with running backs, and I'm just going to say, and just so you guys know, we're going to talk through this a little bit, but we're going to dive into the rookie running backs, overreactions, underreactions. We're going to talk about some young and veteran wide receivers that had really good week ones. What is Matt seeing on film with these players? But my first question to you, Matt, is what are the top 2 to 3 make or break traits for running backs based on your process and experience? So thinking about things that when you see this, you're like, man, that's a big red flag, because historically it's something you haven't seen players improve at, versus maybe things that, we can nitpick players, but it's something that they can get a lot better at with better coaching, more reps, and just honestly their approach to the game. So what are those 2 to 3 things, though, when you see them that you're like, ooh, woo, this is not going to be good.
Processing speed is very important. Just like quarterbacks, the most important trait of good processing is, or the most important thing about players that play in the middle of the field and begin in the middle of the field is how fast they process information. We think about that with quarterbacks, but running backs and centers are the same way. So with a running back, how fast they process information and integrate that into their decision making with blocking and footwork, and it's processing is a big kind of cloud for like vision and decision making. It's kind of it's like basically those two things together, and how fast and confidently and accurately you do it. Footwork, how agile you are in terms of being able to pair your footwork with the solutions that are in front of you or the problems that you need to avoid in front of you. So if you don't have strong footwork that's linked to fast, confident processing, that's very difficult to fix after so many years of playing the position. And then I would say the next thing after that is I would say the baseline level of contact balance. I've been studying players for 20 years. I use a grading system, as you could see, that they talk about, that they like. And I've looked at, hundreds of running backs, and I found that there are only a few, like a handful of players who've even remotely delivered fantasy starter seasons if they can't bounce off indirect contact from a linebacker or a safety.
Tell people what you mean by indirect contact.
Indirect contact is like a glancing shot that isn't straightforward at you, where it's pad on pad in the chest. You're coming down at a 90-degree angle at each other. So
these aren't arm tackles. These are just not a head-on collision. But
yes.
They can take a shot from like a 45-degree angle, that sort of thing.
Yeah, 45, from the side, from just anything other than straight downhill. Two people coming at each other like that, like an Oklahoma drill. That's a direct collision. So this is more of an indirect shot. And so you see that if a running back has, like, Darren McFadden was a good example of someone who had 1,000 yards, but he was an example of a guy who I'd watch him run 10 yards through a hole and drop his pads into a flat-footed safety and fall backwards. Most backs who do that don't find their way into an NFL lineup or in a contributing level for long as a performer.
I do have to tell you, I also have a bingo card going that's from Mr. Ian Hartitz himself. He came back when he knew you were coming on the show, and he gave me a list of players that you might reference as like a 2000s, early 2010s player. Ian, you're 0 for 1. We did not have Darren McFadden on the list, but I actually love you bringing up his name, because McFadden was a highly, highly lauded prospect. I mean, when this guy came in the league, people forget they thought he was going to take over the NFL, and it never really happened.
Ian, I haven't seen the card, but I'm going to try and swerve around it because I'm sure like Marlon Mack is probably on there. So we'll see.
He's got some good ones.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll try and guess it at the end on the bingo card to see who I should have mentioned that I didn't, to get to help Ian win. But that's the way it goes.
Yeah. So, all right. So we've got processing ability, connecting the process to actually then being able to quickly make that decision and integrate it into, having the footwork in place to take advantage, essentially. So you've processed it, but now can you actually take the next step of integrating? That reminds me of playing Madden with my son, Landry. And once he got to about 13 years old, I just noticed that there was an integration between his hand and eye coordination of him processing. I was processing what was happening on the video game at the same speed as Landry, but the integration to my fingers and hitting the right buttons on the joysticks was not the same as Landry's. And so therefore I stopped playing Madden with Landry because I did not want to continue to lose to him, Matt, even though I thought I had a better game plan than him. I thought I understood football better. His just ability to integrate what he was seeing to that joystick, it became a big problem for me. And I have to give Landry a hat tip. Like Landry was going for it on fourth down before anyone in the NFL ever did. He went for it on every fourth down. Also drove me crazy. I'm like, it's 4th and 7 from your 3, punt. And he's like, no, I'll just get a first down. Yeah. And so that was also very frustrating.
Yeah. And part of playing, part of playing football and playing processing information very fast and then being able to execute it with confidence is the equivalent of playing out of your mind. Alex Smith was a great example of a player who played within his mind. And so what would happen is he would hesitate and he would overthink. And as what you realize over time is, music, I always talk about football being a lot like improvisational music. You have to learn all this theory, all this technique, all these skills. And then, as Charlie Parker would say, you learn all that, and then you just have to forget all of that when you get on stage and wail, and hope that all of those processes that you ingrained come out. Frank Gore is a great example of a guy who could do that. He should be on his bingo card there, but he's a player who even at the ripe age was keeping Marlon Mack and Kenyon Drake on the bench because of the fact that he could integrate skills so quickly that it still mattered, and he'd play smart football that Dwain McFarland would approve of as a coach, because of the fact that he was going to keep the offense on the field with what he did. He got the yards that the scheme needed him to get, even if he couldn't break the 50-yard runs anymore.
Well, Ian missed again. I have to tell you, complete noob move by Ian not having Frank Gore. That should have been his lotto lock ticket.
Yeah.
So sorry, Ian, you're 0 for 2 now. But let's jump into these rookies because, rookies number one just get a lot of attention anyway. Okay. Because they're rookies and people have very strong thoughts about, you shouldn't have taken a rookie so early. Then there's other people that know rookies are where the value is at, in fantasy drafts. I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle, depends on where you're getting to draft them, all sorts of things that really come into play. But the first guy that we're going to talk about is none other than, the top running back to go in this last draft. And that is Mr. Ashton Genty. And if we look at what he did from a utilization standpoint, I mean, you can see here 87% of the snaps, 86% of the rushing attempts, 55% route participation. So out there for more than half of the passing plays. But real key here, 100% of the time when they were in the 2-minute drill, they had him out there. 70% of the time in long down and distance guys. And so that's the time when you need to trust your back to block. Because guess what? The defense is going to go man. It's 3rd and 7. They want to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly. And that running back is most likely going to need to make a block in that scenario. And they trusted him. And all the short yardage stuff, like down inside the 5, and look, it's a weak depth chart. Is the thing I would say here for the Raiders. On the flip side of that, he averaged 2 yards per carry. I went back and I did watch, all the plays from Ashton Genty. I put some notes down here, Matt, just from me. Look, he looks still like a very patient runner to me, which is what I saw in college. He's letting things evolve in front of him, and he's confident in doing that. He doesn't feel rushed about anything. He's not a guy that's ramming into the back of his lineman, where they just get the ball and they're like, hole's supposed to be here, me go here, right? And just cracks like the back of a lineman's. I think that was A.J. Dillon in week 1, did that to Dickerson, just ran right into his spinal cord. I'm sure the lineman really loves that. My question, though, I did note a couple of times, can he continue to remain that patient in the league, or does he potentially need to sometimes really more take what was there? I did note a couple of plays where it looked like there was potentially a lane he really could have hit based on leverage and everything. And he just kind of continued to remain patient and maybe pressed it a little bit long. But very, very curious about you, because the community's going wild over this 2 yards per carry stuff, which is kind of funny because they're not talking about it with Chase Brown. They're not talking about the fact that Saquon was under 4 yards per carry in week 1. It's funny how we apply these things to one player, but then we just let it go for another. So what did you see with Genty in week 1? Do you think he continues to hold on to this massive stranglehold as far as, the number of snaps and everything that he got in week 1?
Yeah, I believe he will. And I think that when you look at this, we have to understand the dynamic that it's easy for the fantasy community and the football community at large, when they've seen a player prove that they can do something, now they just eliminate them from bad games and saying, oh, there's a downturn. Unless that player proved them wrong to begin with early on, and then early on they have a bad game, then they're going to say, see, it came back. That's kind of the bias thing we see.
Which is partially fair, that you would give someone that had a bad game, a pass. I think we should do that. I think the question comes down to, like, really, should you be saying Ashton Genty is bad based off of one game, given what we know about him from his college film?
No, I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers fans thought that James Conner was a bad back, and that Benny Snell in an
They
opener
thought
on
Lev Bell
Sunday
was
night.
bad after 1 year.
They did. They thought he was bad too. And we might find out later that they thought Najee Harris was bad, and he isn't bad. But they might be 0 for 3 in this regard. I mean, Benny Snell was their guy after one game because of yards per carry. And, now we're like, 8 years into it, and we've got James Conner still holding off Trey Benson a little bit, So you look at Genty, I'm not in the least bit worried about him from what I saw. What he reminded me of overall was a back who's just dealing with subpar offensive line play. And, he was dealing with situations where the defense was prepared for what was coming. And there weren't great leverage opportunities on a consistent basis. There was penetration in the backfield, oftentimes multiple defenders. And he looked like 1999 or 2000, what was it, 2001 version of rookie LaDainian Tomlinson, who averaged 3.9 yards per carry with the Chargers before his career just took off. He looked like that kind of back. Like, he ran with power, he ran with balance, he was able to work off of contact. He could make people miss in tight spaces and find something where I joke that, good backs, a part of processing is that they can turn lemons into lemonade. Well, he basically turned sand into lemonade in a shot glass. I mean, that was basically what he did this week. So it wasn't like there was a lot of lemonade to be able to make from sand, but the fact that he did it was kind of miraculous. He hit the creases where he was supposed to, I felt, and I felt like the areas where you could nitpick, maybe you could read the leverage a little bit longer. Part of it is you're getting familiar with your blocking scheme at full speed against defenders who are really trying to hit you for the first time since your bowl game last year. So, because most run games aren't played at full intensity in practice. They don't do that anymore. So
Right.
you're really not getting a chance to see what a running back's about. I mean, Kyle Shanahan has said it best, is that we never really know what we have in a running back until we get real hitting in the regular season. And you could see that's why maybe the Jaguars waited to trade, Tank Bigsby, because they wanted to see what they had, in real time in the first week. And I think that with Genty, I mean, even Raheem Mostert said this week, he said he hit everything he needed to, and he just needs to stay confident and not try to do too much. And down the line, it's very possible that he will have some games where he gets frustrated and he tries to bounce things out if the line doesn't create for him consistently. I watched Nick Chubb in his first game, and I remember safety Will Blackman, who had been retired, talking about this guy's never going to amount to anything after watching him against the Giants in the first 3 quarters of a game. And I'm watching him, Brian Baldinger's watching him, and we're going, this guy's very good. And there was one play in that entire preseason game where he tried to bounce something outside because in the first 2 quarters, he was taking what was there. So you're going to see that from Genty from time to time. It's just like a quarterback trying to force a throw. There's going to be a time he's going, I'm just going to try and not run the defense because I'm just tired of this. I'm tired of being stuck in traffic. I mean, everyone who's ever been in rush hour traffic has tried to swerve into a different lane and then watch the lane they were in literally start flowing like it's an unclogged pipe, okay? And you're sitting there going, why did I move to this lane? You're going to see your running backs do this when they're young, on occasion out of frustration. I would not worry about Ashton Genty as long as he continues to get the touches, and I believe he will. You're going to see other players get more. I mean, at some point they'll get Mostert in there and let him play a little bit if they make him active, and they'll do the same with Zamir White. But Genty's going to get the majority of the work. He may not be worth his ADP. I don't think he was ever worth his ADP in redraft this year. But I think that he'll have moments in games that you'll look at it and go, I'm looking forward to him as they build an offensive line and get comfortable. And he's absolutely the top dynasty buy, but but in redraft right now,
Just real
panic,
quickly,
no, but hold on. Yeah.
in redraft, like he's still currently valued right now based on Fantasy Calculator or Fantasy Calc, which looks at all these trades from all these different sites. Right now, he's valued as the running back 6 still, so people are not really moving off of his ADP. So it sounds like what you are saying, like, hey, in a 1-year league, you would probably be willing to trade Genty if you think you can get someone that thinks he's the running back 6 in fantasy, which is where he went in drafts.
Yes, I mean, like to me, he's probably more the running back 13 to 15, and which is still good. But yeah, if you can somehow find that capital, I would probably go for that just because I don't have a lot of faith in the line. But here's the thing: he is a special player. One of the things that he has that separates him from a lot of good prospects is what Marshawn Lynch had, Adrian Peterson had, Matt Forte had. It's the ability to have run stamina, and what that means is the ability to maintain the same pace and intensity of play through contact and in open field, making people miss and using athletic movement where the pace remains steady from the beginning of the play to the very end of the play. There are a lot of guys who wear out after they've done a lot at the line of scrimmage. This is a guy that can make two people miss, run through a hit, drag a guy, pull through the wrap, and then 40 yards later do the same thing as as opponents are tiring out and end up scoring 40 yards down the field or 50 yards or 80 yards. I've seen him do that at Boise State.
Yeah.
That's why Marshawn Lynch, who was not fast anymore after he was in the NFL and gained all that muscle and wasn't the speedster he was at Cal, you watched him, it looked like he was moving just one speed, but everyone was just bouncing off of him and he was working around people. But it was the same speed and intensity at the beginning of the play as it was at the end of the play, and it's why I authored some of the greatest runs in the history of the game.
Yep. So I'm a little different. I'm probably more around running back 8-ish, 7, 8. So I'm not necessarily against trading him, just like you. It's just so hard to fell with this much volume. And the other challenge we start to run into as we run through the other backs, there are other backs that have offensive line issues as well, or they have more competition in their backfield. So, but still, I mean, we're in a range there, like 8 to 13. But let's talk about another rookie here, and this is one that was obviously got a lot of attention because it was an island game, first game of the year. It was the Chiefs' really good defense, the best opponent adjusted defense against running backs in fantasy last year. Minus 4.4 points per game is what running backs average versus the Chiefs versus their average for the season. So, I mean, if you look at what the Chiefs did, they really shut things down. And so obviously you guys know where I'm going. It's Omarian Hampton. He had 81% of the snaps, which is an absolutely insane number for a running back. 83% of the rushing attempts for the Chargers in week 1. 61% route participation, got all the short yardage work. They didn't need to run the 2-minute offense the way the game plan worked out, but they did trust Hampton on long down and distance scenarios to stay in and block. So essentially very similar to what we saw with Genty. I think the caveat to Omarian Hampton versus Genty, it's interesting, right? Because he does have Najee Harris, who is still ramping up from the eye injury. And so obviously Hampton was on a snap count in week 1. That's going to go away as the season progresses. So I think there's more of a risk here with Hampton as far as losing touches to, the backup running back and Najee Harris. But on the flip side, the Chargers offense also looked great. And so if suddenly Omarian Hampton gets 60% of the snaps instead of 80%, but he's playing on an offense that looks pretty lethal, they could still end up very close, but want your thoughts on what you saw with Hampton on film and the things that you think are most critical and how he stacked up versus Genty, as well as that competition from Najee Harris.
Sure, and I'm going to get to that in a moment because those are really more like the facts and the more objective observations of things that I do when I look at skills and techniques that he has and doesn't have. But I first will say, as a longtime football watcher, and we all know, and this is subjective, and it's just rooted in kind of superstition, but just to kind of have fun with it. The Chargers are known for starting hot and being the biggest Charlie Brown failures in the AFC West. They are the team that has been very good at basically shooting itself in the crotch on a regular basis. as a team. Now that was under Phillip Rivers. It might not be that way with Herbert, but even then, even some of that has bled in. That part of the culture with the Chargers has been that they find a way to fail. And so
Don't you think that Harbaugh helps with a lot of that? I mean, we already saw it last year. I mean, they were pretty consistent from
yeah,
beginning to end. Justin Herbert was hurt to begin the year last year, and once he was healthy from the ankle issue, like they just looked like a much better offense.
I would.
I mean, you add Keenan, obviously Quentin Johnston we can get to a little bit later here in the show, but I mean, Lad McConkey's a very good player. So for me personally, I think we throw all that in the trash.
Well,
I think this is just a completely different team.
I think you're probably right, but what we want to watch for is how the offensive line continues to perform, how the defense stands up too. So far they looked really good, but again, with the Chiefs and how they played, they got ahead early. They were able to play a type of football that benefits Omarian Hampton, because when you watch Omarian Hampton play, what you see is a guy with very good top end speed, but he needs a runway to get there. He's like a big commercial airline jet. Okay, like he's not gonna be at his top speed right away. He needs a long runway to start to fly. And if he gets it, that's great. Well, he got it on outside runs. There's certain outside runs that when you get good blocking and you get around the corner, he can be dangerous. There's gap plays where you have a pulling guard, a lead or a lead blocker, and you are guided into that crease. And all the effort by the offensive line is to that one runway. And his job is to hit that thing no matter what. And he can do a little bit to manipulate it, kind of like Leonard Fournette back in his day, to kind of try and hit that. And then you just be the bull in the china shop. And he does that extremely well. And on plays where they asked him to do that, he did that well. He showed his power. He showed that he was decisive. He showed the patience that he needed in those small situations just to set up that crease. But when the defense said, you know what, or they ran something that wasn't strictly a gap play and the defense was able to, blitz or get penetration or seal off lanes that were the primary lanes and squeeze things a little tighter and make him do what Ashton Genty can do very well, which is navigate obstacles in short space and be able to find an open area. Hampton was not as good as that and has never been as good as that. His processing speed and really may be fine, but his footwork and short area quickness is not at that level. Does that make him a bad back? Absolutely not. It makes him more of a player who's in that, what I would call like that Latavius Murray type of style of back, where Murray's kind of the midpoint type of player in that regard. Rashard Mendenhall might be a upper middle class version of that player, that you say, listen, get downhill, build up speed, run through people, good to go. We can do these things with you. The reason that I think Najee Harris might not be the backup, but might be the co-starter down the line, is that Najee Harris, while people look at him and go 3 whatever yards per carry with the Steelers for 3 years, he also had 1,000 yards with them behind an offensive line that was not very good and quarterbacks who were worse for the most part. Right. So you really had it when Najee was on the field. They knew what was coming, and this was a guy still though had very good short area quickness, and he can navigate those tight little spots the way Le'Veon Bell could. Not as well as Le'Veon Bell, but to a level that was better than people think. And I think he offers a complement to Omarian Hampton as that guy who can run. You can run more zone with him. You can have. He's going to be a little more creative than what Hampton can give you. So I think what you're going to see is closer to a 50-50 split, especially when you consider the eye injury. I have a father and uncle and a grandfather who probably combined have about 150 years of experience of examining the eyeball. And my father worked with Olympic athletes. He treated eye injuries. And I explained what was going on with this in the summer. And I said, obviously you don't know really what's going on and there's a limited information, but can you give me a guess of whether or not it's true that this is a straightforward injury? And he said, from my guesstimation of what I can know, he said it was probably a hyphema, which is an injury to the anterior chamber of your eyeball where blood gets into it, usually from some sort of shockwave force, like an explosion. And it's not a straightforward injury in terms of that it's like superficial, but it's a straightforward injury in terms of healing. He said it's very easy to heal. It takes 5 to 6 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks to heal, but it means you can't work out because you can't get any build the ocular pressure in your eye. So things like getting hit in the head or carrying, a heavy weight and doing that on a daily workout kind of basis, risk of getting poked in the eye, things like that, that could really lead to some major problems. So you're just going to have to sit still and wait. And that's what happened. So he's got to recondition. Najee Harris has got to recondition himself. And that's why you saw the ramp up like that. So while the numbers look good, I think there's enough context behind the numbers to at least be neutral about any conclusion with Omarian Hampton. He's good enough that he's going to be on the field. He's not losing his job. But he could lose 30 to 50% of his touches, especially if defenses start to go, you know what? We can get past this offensive front. We can play certain looks where we can force this guy to change direction before he even hits the line of scrimmage. And at that point, Jim Harbaugh and company will look at enough film and go, we need to put Najee Harris in a little bit more often because he can create around that in ways that I haven't seen Hampton do.
So you probably have Hampton as a sell. He's graded out right now over at fantasycalc.com as the running back 15. He has fallen a tad. I think he's a buy. Just depending on how people like at RB15, like that's where you drafted him, so it's fine. But if you do find a manager that's willing to sell him for less, and so again, I'm not the film expert you are. I watched and pretty much came to similar conclusions. I can't be nearly as nuanced as you, but essentially what I saw was when things were well blocked up, he did well.
Yeah.
He had a couple nice runs up the middle where he did like get through a tight hole and, put his head down and, got some tough yards. But at the same time, he didn't get himself out of a jam really at any point. If things were on lockdown, he was locked down. Versus with a guy like Genty, I think there's still an opportunity to actually gain yards, even if your offensive line fails, based on what I saw. So I think we're in a alignment around what we were seeing. The one thing I would say is like the team did invest a first round pick in him. They did not give Najee Harris really that much money. I guess it's a decent amount of money for running backs today in the NFL, but it's a 1-year deal. I think it probably comes down to like a 60-40. You see it more 50-50. We really don't know. Like we have no clue. You and I are doing our best job to guess, like based on the things that we look at. So we still end up being pretty close. I'm closer to a hold buy if someone really is panicking about Omarian Hampton, but it sounds like for you, if you could get a running back 15, if someone's willing to pay you like they think he's a borderline running back 1, you would probably take that, especially if like you had a need on your fantasy roster.
I would probably consider it. Yeah, I'm more of a hold with leaning towards sell.
Okay.
But it's again, what it depends on is over the next few weeks, we want to see how good this Chargers team is. And if they really do look as good as they are, they're going to be in situations where maybe they can just say, you know what, we're going to have closeout touches. And if you have closeout touches like that on a regular basis and you're playing with a lead, then this may fall into what Omarian Hampton does well. And so then he may end up being the 60% back in this case. So I still think there's room for your case for sure. There's a good argument there. But it's just about whether or not you believe the Chargers in a competitive division are going to be dominant or whether they're going to be the Chargers, maybe even just slightly better than every year where they're competitive. But it's one of those things where it's tight games and it might be scenarios where they're not, bullying teams. And I think Omarian Hampton's the great bully back, but when they bully back, maybe that's a little bit of an issue.
Well, let's look at another back that really had a similar outing, honestly, to Najee Harris, and this is like the human resources meme ever. And again, you got Javonte Williams cheap, guys.
Is he Toby?
Yeah, so like when you look at the meme, it's like, Omarian Hampton got 3.1 yards per carry, or Javonte Williams got 3.6 yards per carry, and he scored the 2 touchdowns. And they're like, oh, you're cute. Omarian Hampton got 3.1 yards per carry, essentially had the same role, and really what's probably a better offense, or they're close. And everybody's like, human resources. Somebody get this guy out of my office. And again, I get it. Part of it comes down to you got Javonte for cheap. You had to pay a 3rd-round pick for Omarian Hampton. That certainly skews the way people are going to view a week 1 performance. One guy underperformed his draft capital in fantasy. The other guy drastically outperformed. But let's talk about Javonte, because 80% of the snaps dominated the Cowboys backfield. Now, Jaden Blue was not active for this game. He had been dealing through injuries throughout preseason, got another injury kind of close to the end of the preseason. We'll see if he ends up being active and doing anything, because he was getting some of the 2-minute offense and pass down work early in camp. Don't know if Javonte can hold on to this thing for the whole year, but I mean, Jaden Blue, a lot of people thought was overrated for where the Cowboys took him. And then we have Miles Sanders doing Miles Sanders things, misses a wide open lane. Then he does hit a long run, immediately fumbles and gets taken off the field, So when you look at Javonte and what he did in week 1, when I watched it was kind of similar to Omarian. I thought he got what was there, much more of a battering ram at this point in his career after the injuries versus at least right now with what we're seeing early in the game. Basically, was it blocked? Yes, he got the yards, put his head down, ran hard. Not the same Javonte, though, that we used to see be able to make these crazy jump cuts, bounce off 3 different defenders, and, really hit the long run. That wasn't necessarily what we saw here, but he played well. So when you look at Javonte Williams, do you see him as being a guy that continues to hold on to this backfield in Dallas, or do you think it's something that deteriorates over the course of the season?
I'm leaning right now towards him continuing to be the main guy. And mainly because, as you saw with Miles Sanders, he needs to stop and ask for directions to the hole. And he's the quintessential back who is what that inexperienced draftniks love, because it's all athletic ability and speed and size, but no nuance. And details missing, and details where there's lots of lapses with detail. And I think that that's the problem with him, is that when he's on, he looks like a top back, but that on light just flickers and then comes on briefly, and then smoke comes out of the outlet, basically for him. So you look at Williams, he's dealing with that, and he's dealing with Jaden Blue, who, when asked about Blue last week not starting, Brian Schottenheimer didn't talk about the injury. He talked about how there's players on this team who they sometimes give great effort and things are looking great. And I'm not talking straight about Jaden Blue about all this. That's what he's basically said. But I am, because he said sometimes they're not giving the effort the next day that's commensurate with me feeling like that we can trust them.
Consistency.
Yeah. And so Blue to me is like an Austin Eckler starter kit, where there's a lot of the advanced components in place that you can plug in and should be able to download once he starts getting onto the field. And once it finishes downloading, you have a fairly close proximity of Austin Eckler as it gains a little bit more experience with its AI. But I would say there's some pieces that look like they might be damaged a little bit, and they could be fixed rather easily in the right hands, but we don't know if he's in the right hands. And I would say, sorry, Dwayne, but based on, the history of the Cowboys in the past few years, I would say that maybe this is one of those where they look at it, it's like that toy car with the components, and they think the best way to fix it is like me trying to fix a TV from the 70s, which is like him putting an elbow to the side of it, and then the picture gets straight and comes on, and it doesn't work with these types of machines. So I'm a little worried about the Schottenheimer approach here with this, but Blue has that sky-high talent, but you don't want to be – he's a roster clogger right now for you. I like to look at fantasy where it's like you may want to draft and redraft an equal or close to equal number of running backs and wide receivers as the biggest number of positions that you have on your squad.
I like to have a little more running back because I don't want to be like those people chasing cheese down a hill in England as sport, trying to go after that one running back, who pops up on the waiver wire. I actually rather hopefully land one of them. And if they don't, and I have some clear opportunities, I can unclog my roster with running backs and add more startable points available receivers off the waiver wire, and then have more capital with a stockpile to trade if I need to for a running back. Because you only need one running back in a lot of leagues where you have lots of receivers. If you just have a good running back too and you have great receivers, you're good. Now there's lots of ways to go about doing this, but to me, with Blue, I feel like he could be a roster clogger. I'd rather be, and later on in the season when everybody's blown their money on somebody else, I would rather pick up Jaden Blue when I see signs that there's a possibility there and be one of the few guys that could actually bid on him and make it worthwhile and see good signs of that than try and chase a guy like that right now. I think Javonte, with that offensive line and the balance that they have, it's the Cowboys, but he's a savvy enough runner to make plays in terms of knowing when to hide behind his linemen, when to push ahead, when to try and work for the hard yards. And it seems like he's comfortable in this run system, which he wasn't as comfortable in Sean Payton's.
Yeah, I think the big thing that Williams has going for him is that it's Sanders and Blue behind him. So I kind of approach like my roster strategy different. I think it depends like on the depth of your league and stuff, and you play in a lot of deep leagues. I play in a lot of deep leagues where there's not very many people on the wire. And honestly, if I drop Jaden Blue, he's going to get picked up.
Right.
So my thought process on Jaden Blue, we'll talk about Williams too, but it's just that he could be terrible. Like he could be, but I'm not going to drop him. And the reason why is because Miles Sanders is the only thing standing in front of him. And if Javonte Williams were to go down, like I don't trust Miles Sanders. Like I feel like they might just try to force it to Jaden Blue. And he could surprise us. He might not. He might tank, but then I can just cut him after that, right? If he gets a game or two and then they're like, go back to the bench, we're going to play Miles Sanders. Like that's all the signal I need. Then I'm done with Jaden Blue. But it does depend on your roster construction. I think that honestly receivers are harder. Most of the time when you buy a wide receiver off the waiver wire, you get exceptions like Puka Nacua and things like that. But for the most part, they're what I call a fugazi. It's, hey, they were out there a lot. They caught a touchdown or something, but like their target shares, their ability to earn targets from the receiver is typically not there. Again, that is not always the case. It just it depends like on what players we're talking about. But I will say with Javonte real quick, I think people that are refusing to like put him in their top 24, like heading into into this week 2, like with their ranks and stuff, I think they just have take log. And I think they're just being too stubborn. Do we know that Javonte will hold on to the role the whole season? We don't know. Honestly, and the best test point will be to see a game when Jaden Blue is active and see if this changes at all. So maybe we get that this weekend. But I think you're just really holding on too strongly to your priors. Does Javonte Williams look great? No, but we don't know that he really has any challengers. It's a question as if to Jaden Blue can be a challenger. And if you wanted to lean to the negative side that he's probably not, I don't think I could argue against that.
Yeah.
So I think Javonte, like right now, I would value him rest of season as a borderline running back too. I think going into the week, just for this week, like he needs to be in your top 24 in your ranks. And if you have him on your roster, you're most likely starting him.
Yeah, it's not a controversial take whatsoever from my perspective. And really the biggest thing about Blue that worries me is what I just mentioned, and that he can't hold on to the football based on the past. And he's going to have to prove that he can do that. Him and Tuten might as well be holding on to greased watermelons when they're trying to run through a hole. I mean, that's how low their ball security rates were. Once it gets below 1 per 60 for your career, that's bad. And Jaden Blues and Tuten's were the worst.
Ask you this.
Yeah.
What I have seen with that, now you've tracked that data, and you've scrutinized it more than me. But to me, ball security seems like it would come down to, will you listen to your coaches and just do what they're telling you to do with ball security? And if you can, it's not like the processing thing where it's there or it's not, right? If they're willing to listen and they're willing to take the coaching and they're willing to do the things they need to do to improve it, we know there are techniques that will improve, your ability to stop fumbling the football. Now, I think the question is like, will he do it? Will Jaden Blue do that? Will he listen?
Yeah, I'll say it's a little more complicated just from the standpoint that it is a correctable issue. We saw Tiki Barber correct it for sure.
Yeah.
But we also see that what happens is some guys overreact and they stop playing their game because they're so concerned about it that they overcorrect, and now they're not moving the way they needed to. Now they're not reading the field the way they needed to. Tyson Williams is a great example of a running back who was dominating in the first half of a game against the Raiders, and then I honestly think that a veteran said to him, "Hey kid, you're doing great," and he's thinking in the back of his mind, this veteran's thinking, "Yeah, but I'm getting a nice veteran contract here, and I want to be able to play, and this kid's about to take my job away." And he's thinking, "Kid, just hold on to that ball because Harbaugh's going to bench you in a hot second. You don't want to hold on to this ball." And all suddenly he ran in the next half. He was literally running with both hands around the ball, like in a shell, like he was a
All that
turtle.
fluidity, all the fluidity is gone.
It was gone. Just sucked
Yeah.
the life out of him. And you saw Stephon Ridley go through that. I've noticed that running backs who have very low ball carrying skill, based on my data, 10% of them ever become running back ones in fantasy, ever have a running back.
That's
on
lower
team.
than I would have ever thought,
Yeah.
to be honest. Now, obviously, that's across varying levels of
Yeah.
skills of players, so
It
you
is.
have to bucket it. But
Yeah.
that number is surprising.
As-
That's kind of eyebrow raising.
As an initial thing. Now, that doesn't mean that that the guys who are good, but that also includes guys who we know never were probably going to be good. So when you start to refine it towards who's good, that's the next step in the research process that I'll be doing. So there are guys that can correct. I mean, look, Adrian Peterson had 20 fumbles in his first 3 seasons. He had 16 in years 2 and 3. And now
It also comes down to, like, because Adrian Peterson's so good, it's just like, well, what are we going to do? We
What
got
are we
to
gonna
give him
do?
the ball. And it does come down to the coach.
Yeah.
Is Tom
it-
Coughlin your head coach?
Yeah.
Or is Andy Reid, who we've seen be more forgiving, to fumbles. So there's so many
Yeah,
variables.
because if Andy Reid had Tom Coughlin on his staff, and Coughlin was trying to bench him, he'd probably lock Coughlin in an office if he had Adrian Peterson, and just give him a lifetime supply of Werthers, as my buddy Cecil Lammy over at Football Guys
We
would.
got to pull back the
joke
Werthers
about that.
tray.
Yep, we do.
So we've talked about, some guys that had a big role in week 1. Let's talk about the opposite. Some guys that didn't have a big role in week 1, but honestly, we'll see what you thought about him on film, but we'll start with Mr. RJ Harvey. Got a little over 30% of the snaps. We had this, the Sean Payton surprise of Tyler Beatty is really the guy I want to feature in my passing game in the run game, which is, it's funny because it's something we've seen from Sean Payton over the years. He doesn't always do that, but he is very willing to mix the third guy in, and it was Tyler Beatty in week 1. Obviously, you had J.K. Dobbins playing the role of the hammer. He got the short yardage work. He was the base first and second down back. Now, Harvey did mix in, but Harvey looked really good. Like, I'll just give you real quick the notes I had written down from going back and watching, Mr. R.J. Harvey. Like, the speed and the acceleration were like fantastic, which we already saw in college. And I honestly thought, Matt, that he actually read his blocks really well in this game. I saw some people post that first run to the outside saying he didn't, but I went back and looked at the leverage. I saw somebody put a screenshot of a cutback. Guys, just because you see a hole and you think it's a cutback, look at the defender. The defender had already beaten his blocker on the backside. If he makes that cut, that defender's immediately taking that hole away and dropping him for a loss. Harvey saw that and kept that play outside. It ended up only being 2 yards, but I took that as a positive. First quarter, 5:16 mark. You guys can go check it out. There's an RPO play with Bo Nix. The backside, contain guy has to respect Bo Nix just for that millisecond. But then he sees this RJ Harvey, and RJ Harvey's so fast, he's already gone. He couldn't close the gap on him. RJ Harvey got 8 yards on that play. I looked in the second quarter, 8:53 mark, tries to set up he sets up the second level defender. It didn't really work out, but he realized it and he just puts his head down. And that's something you want to see, because I know Harvey was a guy that sometimes in college, as you like to say, Matt, wanted to get to the corner store. And he wasn't doing that here. And we saw that in the preseason game too. And it feels like it's something where he's taking the coaching. And then I'll say there's 2 other plays that really impressed me. There was an outside toss set to the right, and man, he set up a massive cutback lane, and he was so close, guys. The defender just made a great play. There was a big defender there. did manage to get him to the ground. But like we're talking about, like might have been another 30-yard play that he had set up. And then obviously the big one that everyone saw was in the fourth quarter. He hits it inside. He gets through a tight crease. Then he weaves away from the second level defenders, hits the accelerator, and he races the third level defender. He gets a 50-yard gain on that play. And I have to say it's a small sample, but when I watch these guys, he was the one I got the most excited about with what I watched on film of the players we've talked about so far. Now, I don't know that his role will grow. I don't know what Sean Payton will do, but if it does, I feel like this is a player that now, I mean, people are going to be thinking about benching this player. This is the kind of guy I would like to try to buy low on.
I agree, and I want to hold him. If I have him, I'm holding him, and if I can get him as a throw-in, I'm going to do that too in a trade because I'm a big J.K. Dobbins fan. I think he was on the level of Jonathan Taylor before his injuries, just a different style of back.
He was good last year.
Yeah, he certainly
People
was.
want to talk about the breakaway speed, but still, like he hit top speeds, like his 10-plus yard carry rate, so explosive rush plays, one of the better backs in the league. So, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, so when you look at that, you know that he's going to be the man for as long as he can stay healthy, and that's always been kind of the curse with him is can he stay healthy? If he doesn't, R.J. Harvey's the man in Denver behind in a good offense. You know, that didn't play unbelievably well last week, but I think that will continue to climb into being a decent unit. From what I saw on film with Harvey, I agree with you. He made good decisions. He processed the game well. What you described was good processing. You're understanding the down and distance situation. You're understanding how the blocking scheme's unfolding and what the defense is trying to do to stop it. And you're not taking unnecessary risks in those situations. You're trying to keep the game in a situation where your offensive coordinator is like, you're not putting me in 2nd and 13. You're putting me in 2nd and 6. You know, that's much better than, I'd rather have you do that, which is why, the Frank Gores of the world were around annoying the Evan Silvas of fantasy football for so long because of the fact that, that he was creating more 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 7 situations, and Kenyon Drake and Marlon Mack were guys creating more 2nd and 11 or 3rd and 13 situations, trying to be the hero rather than trying to keep the offensive playbook open. And you saw that with R.J. Harvey. And what I saw in college from Harvey was very unusual. Most guys like Harvey, who are fast, quick twitch guys, do very well on gap plays where it's that one crease downhill, just hit the gas, don't think.
Tevin Coleman.
Yeah, Tevin Coleman. Yeah, exactly. There you go. I'm sure that's on the list. But
Ian's over. Ian's batting over. He's going to have to up his game.
I'm telling you, I pay attention to you, Ian. Okay, but here's the thing: you've got to you look at that situation, and you would think he'd be a good gap runner with that speed. He was a better zone runner, if you ask me. He didn't try and bounce things outside unnecessarily as a zone runner. But as a gap runner, he tried to find cutbacks that he shouldn't find. You shouldn't cut back on gap very often. And he would do this in the red zone, and you'd just be like, okay, that's the issue you got to fix. Usually you don't see that with a guy. So in all actuality, he's a better decision maker than I think most people characterize. And a lot of the runs I saw in the preseason that people were going off about didn't merit the criticism. So he made a couple, but they weren't, people were overreacting. Very good receiver. Everything he did looked impressive, not only physically, but conceptually. Even the 1-yard loss on the reception was a one-handed catch at a difficult angle. So
and a late throw.
On a late throw. Yeah. So to me, this is a game. This is a player that if you have J.K. Dobbins, there's no way you're parting with R.J. Harvey. If you have J.K. Dobbins, you might want to try and get R.J. Harvey if you didn't get him. And even if you don't have him, I would say this is the guy I'd rather hold him than Jaden Blue.
So absolutely, me too. So let's talk just real quickly. It feels like we're definitely on the same page here. This is a hold or a buy, period. Contingency value. If something happens to J.K. Dobbins, how far up are you moving R.J. Harvey in your ranks for the rest of the season? And if you guys don't know this, you can go over to Matt Waldman and check out the RSP. And he's also got a newsletter where he talks about things like this. So J.K. Dobbins, knock on wood, we don't want this to happen to you, J.K. We love you. But if J.K. Dobbins, something happens, how high does RJ Harvey move up your ranks?
Conservatively top 15, and I think it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to say he could be in the top 10 to top 12 just on his receiving skills and big playability alone.
Yeah, me too. He's the kind of guy, if it worked out right and he ran pure, and he could break your fantasy league in the second half of the year if something were to happen to J.K. Dobbins. So we're on the same page.
Yeah, Bucky Irving type of situation.
Exactly. Love it. Great comp. Another player that was, electric, but a little bit controversial in college when you think about the range of the way, folks thought about him coming out. And that's Bajal Tuten. We've got Tank Bigsby now traded to the Eagles. Tuten did not really have much of a role, very minimal role. He was active in week 1. I know that we'll let you break down what you saw. I thought you put out a great tweet on Twitter about what you saw with Tuten. But do you see Tuten as being a guy that now with Tank Bigsby gone, we know LaQuint Allen is going to get a little bit of the passing down work. He's going to continue to do his thing. But do you think Tuten eventually forces more of a rotation here with ETN?
I do. I mean, because ETN has improved as a zone runner, but I would say that Tuten still showed more in a couple of runs, and what I saw on film in college shows a higher capacity to be a very good zone runner than Travis Etienne ever has. Now, there's a run I showed with Etienne where I said that he got mostly gap runs in the middle of the field, and the play that I showed was actually an inside zone with a backside cap of the tight end coming across. But my view of that still remains the same, even with that being the case, because with a backside cap, that means that you have a tight end coming across the field to be a lead blocker. So he's sealing the front side of the play, and you're working off of that lead block in many respects. It's very similar concept in zone from what makes a guy a better gap runner than zone runner is that he needs somebody to play follow the leader with, And I think that they purposely use some of these things because they know that Etienne kind of needs some guidance in terms of what to stick to and what to play off of to set up runs. And I think that that's why he does that very well. And on gap plays, he does that very well. But I think Tuten's a guy watching his tape. You could see that he'll press within a hair's breadth of his blocker and slide laterally across the field with great quickness and then re-accelerate in a blink of an eye and get downhill and run with power and contact balance for his size. And if nobody's there, he's gone. So he's the wild child of this group. LaQuint Allen is like old Frank Gore. Okay, he is just he can catch, he can block, he can run the scheme you give him. He's going to get the yards you want. He's not all that exciting. Maybe another example is maybe he's T.J. Yeldon, a young T.J. Yeldon in Jacksonville, where occasionally he'll give you some good games because of garbage time and yards, but he's not that exciting. Tuten is the guy that if he can hold on to the ball, because his fumble rate was almost as bad as if I remember it correctly, it was almost as bad as Blues. But if he can do that, I think that you're going to see that they want an element in the game who maybe gives them a little bit better opportunities in zone running. And so he may see his role grow as they gain more trust in him. But you could see from the beginning of the spring, Liam Cohen said, I don't understand what all the fuss was about Travis Etienne. When I came in here, he does everything that I'm looking for him to do. And outside zone is kind of that gap or bridge between guys who are good at gap runs and guys who are purely zone runners. So the fact that they gave him training wheels with inside zone with the backside cap is probably telling you that there's a little bit of room for Tuten to move in there. But to me, Tuten is the most volatile back that we've talked about thus far.
Right. But my thought on Tuten is this: like if it worked out correctly for him, he's very similar to what we just talked about with RJ Harvey. Like if something happened, but he's valued far lower. And so if you're thinking of making a trade for a player, like Tuten is someone you're much more likely to be able to get on the cheap versus an RJ Harvey manager had to actually draft him in like between round 5 and 7, depending on where they were drafting the site. So they've already got something invested in him, right? Tuten was a guy that, he went rounds 10 to 12 in most drafts. So it's not like people don't have anything invested in him. But based on fantasycalc.com, here are the running backs that are valued similarly as far as what's going on in recent trades over the last week to Tuten. Jerome Ford, I would rather have Tuten on my team. Rashad White, I would rather have Tuten on my team. Jaden Blue, we already talked about. I would rather have Tuten on my team. Tyler Algier, that's a very clean handcuff. If something happened to Bijan Robinson, you're getting good value out of Algier. But if I were to say which back has a better chance of taking carries away from the starter, it's probably Tuten over Algier, because Algier's dealing with Bijan Robinson. True. You know what I mean? So it depends on like your roster and stuff. Like obviously a very clear cut handcuff with Tyler Algier. The other name that's on this list is Najee Harris. So I think I like him versus all those names, and you might like Najee a little bit more, but I think they're pretty close. So I think the big thing here is like Tuten is a great buy opportunity, because we have seen Travis Etienne spit the bit in the past. He's looked good and then not looked good from one game to the next. We also had James Gladstone, the new GM of this team, saying, whenever he had his interview, he talked about Bajal Tuten being a guy that he would like to add to the team. It was a very deep running back class. So going at the top of the 4th round, guys, for a guy like Tuten, normally he's probably a 3rd round pick in most classes, but we just had so many, the glutton of running backs that we had available to us pushed him down a little bit.
Yeah, so, I would say this. I mean, with Tuten, he's the guy that I recommended I do a weekly column called The Replacements at the end of the week that are for like
that's a great article.
Guys that you just
over at Football Guys.
Yeah, over at Football Guys. It's basically guys that are still on the waiver wire after your waiver run that might be preemptive additions for the following weeks that you could build a roster with for free, or guys that are emergency ads and that have good matchups and things like that are kind of fringe guys that you're desperate to get or you're looking ahead. And Tuten was the first guy on my list as an ad. Like, this is a guy that you should probably add to your roster.
Yeah, love him. Same page. So guys, go get Tuten. Let's switch gears here. Let's talk about some wide receivers. And we're going to talk about Mr. Keon Coleman, Mr. Utilization score himself in week 1. This was not on my bingo card. So guys, the utilization score is a combination of a player's role as well as the fantasy points that they scored. And essentially think of it as like it's an improved version of expected fantasy points, because it's not just using the touches they got. It also looks at the snaps when they were on the field. Were they on the field inside the 5-yard line? All these different things. And that one more applies to the running backs, but you can see here 94% route participation for Keon Coleman, essentially just not coming off the field. 26% target share. That is a very good number. Catchable targets, 82%. When you play with Josh Allen, you can get a good number here. But the thing I noticed with Keon Coleman when I was watching the film, Matt, one, he caught a fluky touchdown. There was a tip in the back of the end zone, probably going for Khalil Shakir on that play, ends up being tipped into his hands. So you do have 6 points of this 25.2 coming from a touchdown that, it is what it is. But watching him, like, he made several great contested catch scenarios, which we know he's been pretty good at. But even though he was working mostly from the outside, didn't get a lot of play action targets, didn't get a lot of motion, he was working in the intermediate ranges of the field. In fact, he had another play later in the game where he beat his man on a short route and got a shoestring tackle away from scoring another touchdown that would have really been like, okay, great, you had the one that you got lucky on. But he was this close, guys, to scoring another one. Keon Coleman was not a guy that I was very high on coming into the season. I do breakout research, and there are guys like him that had actually went on to break out. Alshon Jeffrey was one of those names that had a similar rookie season to Keon Coleman, went on in year 2 to become a wide receiver 1. A guy that became a wide receiver 2 in their second season was Michael Pittman, that graded out very similar to Keon Coleman in their rookie season. But man, this was a really good game. We know the Bills aren't going to throw the ball this much if they don't have to. So you can set all that aside, but the underlying data is what matters the most to me, which is the 26% target share. Did you see something with Keon Coleman that you felt like was a step forward in his game versus what we saw last year from him? Or do you see this as more of a fluky 1 week kind of thing?
I think that obviously he's going to be a little more up and down because he's in Joe Brady's system, which is spread the ball around and not have one hero wide receiver. I think that's why they got rid of Stephon Diggs and why they got a bunch of guys who all kind of do some things fairly similarly. And they want Josh Allen to just make quick reads and find the open man and not try and hang on to the ball and be the hero and just kind of fit it into one guy as often as he did earlier.
Can I ask you something real quick on this, Matt? Because so here's my thought on a thing like that, and we hear it in Green Bay too, right? I don't really think any team or quarterback plans on I think the idea of spreading the ball around is good. But I do think what changes the equation is when you do have a receiver that's playing so good that no longer matters because they're the one that's open. They're the guy that they know they can trust. And so while the scheme maybe we're going to spread it around to everybody, historically, when I've looked at teams like that, it's because they don't have a superstar. It's not because they just want to spread the ball around. It's because they don't have someone that can literally do all these different things like a if Justin Jefferson played on the Bills, they could say all day that they want to spread the ball around. Justin Jefferson would get a 30% target share because he's a badass. And so I think that's the bigger question for me. Is Keon Coleman taking a step that makes us think he might be better, which would open up more opportunity? Or do you think, no, he's just really probably more of a piece because he got these other holes in his game?
Well, it's a nice narrative that's true in a lot of cases, but the Bills purposely got rid of Stephon Diggs and they started phasing him out of their offense before.
Right, but if they traded for Justin Jefferson, or if Justin Jefferson was on their team.
But they purposely didn't do that. And I think that's the thing, is that they didn't purposely do that because I think they know with Josh Allen is kind of a Ricky Bobby of quarterbacks. He's great, but he's kind of he kind of has a mindset that they wanted to get away from with him. And I think he's one of those guys that, they have a player in tight end Dalton Kincaid who made a living at Utah winning contested catches. He was great at that. They throw him flat routes. They put him on routes where they don't throw him open. They don't ask him to do what he does at his very best. If he played with Michael Penix right now, if I could come from Atlanta and break Dalton Kincaid out of jail, because that's where he is. He's in jail in Buffalo for his game, and break him out and just leave Kyle Pitts there for them, I would leave Milk Carton over in Buffalo, and I would give Michael Penix a guy who is actually ready to make those types of plays, but the offense doesn't want to do that. Khalil Shakir can make contested plays. He did a great job doing that even as a rookie against the Steelers, but they don't want to throw a lot of contested plays to him. Part of it is maybe it's because he's smaller. Part of it's maybe it's because he's such a great runner after the catch. But they have two guys on this team who are really good at that and have shown that ability, and they won't do it. So I know what you're saying, but from my perspective, this is an outlier team in that regard. They truly want to spread it out, and they've purposely not created players like that. Now they
purposely draft guys that they don't think are good enough, so Josh Allen doesn't have to.
They purposely draft guys. That's a good question. That's funny retort. But
I'm
that's
just messing with you.
I know you are. But
my point is, if Keon Coleman does take a step forward and suddenly becomes more, and I'm not saying he's going to. I have no clue. We have one game. Yeah. But I think he would erase all of that. The problem for Dalton Kincaid is they don't play him enough. Yeah. But they've got him in a rotation. At least Keon's out there every play.
But that's my point, is what I'm getting at with this is that they have certain types of what they want, and they have certain roles in their offense. They could have gotten a better player than Joshua Palmer if they didn't think, that's my point.
But see, I think that's another positive for Coleman.
It is, but certain teams, they look at a wide receiver room and they look at it like it's a golf bag, and they go, I need this iron. And
you're right. Like a 7-iron. I need my putter.
And they get more focused on that because they realize that if I try and lean on one guy and he gets hurt, then we're screwed. And I think that's really what's happening. Let's not purposely pick good players. Now, I love Coleman coming out. I looked at reception perception, Matt Harmon's excellent work. It's a must-have piece of analysis. Gives us great quality layers of information. And his separation scores at FSU and Michigan State were concerns, okay, according to that type of analysis. He's a big receiver. They would have cast him, a lot of teams would cast him in a role with routes that are for a primary route runner. And that's
what got people in trouble drafting Equinemius St. Brown in the first round or projecting him when the league changed overnight and went to smaller guys. But, that would prove troublesome if you're going to ask him to run Jamar Chase routes as a primary as Keon Coleman. He's not going to get that type of separation. But in this system, Coleman's separation frustration, that I would call it, isn't as problematic. And there's evidence of that. What we've seen, his ability to compensate for top shelf speed, is that the offense, he's the best contested catch option from his draft class. Hands down. I loved Malik Neighbors, but if I wanted a guy to basically work through a brick wall that was moving with him and catch a football, it would be Keon Coleman. Okay. Very good that way. Very good after the catch. His yak after the catch, we saw that, was very strong. He can combine physicality at the position. He returns punts at FSU. Okay. That's like LeGarrette Blount. People looked at him and said, oh, he's a plotter. He can't separate when he gets in the open field. But he's returning kickoffs and doing a great job of that because he knows how to move and he knows how to set up blocks. And he's physical. And he's a smart football player who works off script. So while he was aligned on 87% of his routes against the Ravens last week, and 12 of the remaining 13% were inside, 6 of his 13 targets came on routes from the inside. So the gravity of where they use him is more important than the amount that they use him. And so when you examine his young career, that follows suit. I mean, his outside alignments in his career have been 86%, inside alignments 13%, targets outside were 59%, slot targets 41%, but he earned 19 catches for 265 yards and 2 scores from slot targets.
And that I wrote him up in the utilization report this week. That was my concern, is that he gets literally zero scheme help, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't get to line up inside enough. They don't put him in motion.
But
and those are challenges.
Yes, but the thing is that the gravity of the slot, of what he gets from the slot, he makes good on. Now, that's what you worry about when you're playing the odds, with this guy. But he's a guy that he can take a quick slant and really burn you. So I think,
and he did that in the game. He did actually perform from the outside as well. One of his bigger plays actually came lined up outside, then working inside. But yes, I feel you. Doesn't get enough of the slot stuff.
Yeah, he had a 20.2 yards per catch average on outside targets thus far in his career. So he may not be able to separate, but most people view separation, that from what I've seen, as college separation, where you've got 2-3 yards on a receiver.
Yeah, that doesn't happen in the NFL.
No, people are playing glove tight on you, and he's a glove tight receiver. So to me, he's the exception to the rule. So I do believe he will be in the lead. He'll be the leading candidate to lead this receiving core in yardage and touchdowns, whereas Shakir will be the co-leader for yardage and likely the leader in catches.
So I moved Keon into that wide receiver 3 range, with the caveat that, like, another big game like this, then we might be considering him as a wide receiver 2 moving forward. Are you at a similar spot?
Yeah, I'm not expecting 1,200 yards. I'm expecting a double-digit touchdown season and probably somewhere between 750 to 900 yards. Let's say that.
All right, let's talk about another young player here that, many people, have probably written off at this point, but it was Quentin Johnston. Dealt with an injury late in camp, gave a chance for Trey Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith to kind of shine in the preseason. But look, lo and behold, week 1, it's all about Quentin Johnston. He ran the second most routes on the team behind Ladd McConkey. And the thing I noticed in this game, going back and watching him, Matt, I felt like they did a good job. Now, whether this can hold up game over game, is something like I would like your thoughts on, but they let him do the things that he's good at. Like, right out of the gate, they run him across the formation, get him a little throw, and let him just do his thing with it. He's a very good player after the catch. That's never been in doubt. He's very nimble for his size. He's got some power. He can run through linebacker arm wraps and things like that. Most wide receivers can't do that, and that's a plus for Quentin Johnston. Hands have always been an issue, but it looked like they were really trying to give him looks like on these deep crossers, getting him into space where he's getting a clean look at the football, not really trying to, force things into contested scenarios and tight coverage where he's just not necessarily, at least to this point in his career, that's not been his strong suit. So when you look at Quentin Johnston, you look at 24.9 fantasy points in week 1. My gut, honestly, is sell high. But at the same time, I also realize that this is a guy that was a first round pick. And if they use him in the right way, like, my advice could be wrong.
Yeah, he's a hold sell high type, depending on where your roster construction is. And a lot of that is that he was used like Gabriel Davis, if you ask me. He's like schemed open. He's given opportunities where he can, like you described, and he's a good route runner and a great after the catch player. And when you look at that situation, it's the question is, do you believe that they're going to be a 3 receiver offense with a lot more passing and than what Greg Roman has done in the past? Or is this an offense that went from basically 34% run before Greg Roman took over to 46% run? And they're like, we still got another 5% we could go to make this what we want it to be. I mean, there are some people out there that believe that no, we're not going to waste Justin Herbert to be a game manager, and we're going to let him throw, and we're going to do differently than what we did with Tyrod Taylor and with Colin Kaepernick and with and Michael Vick to an extent. And even with early career Lamar Jackson, where I felt they kept training wheels on him way too long, and that he didn't really need. But this is that situation where you ask yourself that question: which direction are they going to go? If it's more run, then Quentin Johnston is probably more of a 700, 800 yard player at best, who's a big play guy that you love in best ball, but probably not in redraft. Yeah. If it turns out that they're like, no, we're going to be more like the Bengals, with just a different offensive look, then Quentin Johnston, you're going to wish you kept him and that's the thing. Like
we don't know. We really don't know because it could have been a game plan thing against the Chiefs, who are very good against the run. Now, here's the thing I'll say is after Justin Herbert got healthy last year, their drop back rate over expected did improve, and they were a plus team. The Chargers were. So, but do I think they're going to be as pass heavy as what we saw in week 1? I think it's a stretch. I think we're probably, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Yeah. So, and to your point, it does make it really difficult because Keenan Allen's also there, and Keenan Allen played really well in week 1. Watching him and Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen, what they can do on choice routes, essentially, they're always open.
Yeah, and that's
whereas Quentin Johnston's more schemed. He's not doing that.
That's right. He's a scheme player rather than a matchup player. Even the touchdown that he had, he was basically running off one defender into another on a crossing route to come wide open. And so when you look at situations like that, he's really the third receiver. I don't think he's going to be the first, the first or the second on a regular basis. And there's upside there and some volatility in a good way. But if you're going to bet on it, and I would probably bet against it.
Yeah. So the best example I can think, to come back to what you mentioned, would be if they do suddenly become an offense that's as potent as the Lions, and where you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, aka Ladd, not saying they're the same player, Ladd McConkey, they're getting theirs, right? Their targets are coming. Then you've got a secondary player, Keenan Allen / Sam Laporta, they're getting theirs. And then I think J-Mo could take a step forward this year. I really like Jameson, but just in this example, Quentin Johnston is the Jameson Williams from last year if they throw the ball much more. Now, the Lions remained a balanced offense. They just scored a lot of touchdowns. But if suddenly we have the Chargers throwing the ball all the time, he could give you that boom bust, where your median outcome doesn't kill you every week and you don't have as many busts. Yeah. But if they're back and forth with their game plan, you're going to have some donuts, in my opinion, from Quentin Johnston.
This is the problem with what happened here. They added Mike Williams for a reason. Mike Williams was a true X. And they realize when they look at their team, I don't know what's going on in the scouting department or the GM or whoever the decision maker is, but the Patriots love slot receivers and they're slot happy, and that's all they seem to be able to pick worth a darn over the past 20 years. The Chargers are slot flanker hybrid teams. McConkey is a slot flanker hybrid. Keenan Allen is a slot flanker hybrid. Trey Harris is more of a flanker.
And then when you look at Johnston, they thought they picked an X, a split end, but he doesn't have the hands and contested catch positioning and tracking of one. He's best in the slot because of his routes and his ability to win after the catch, and he's usable as a flanker because you give him off the line of scrimmage and you give him shorter routes to work. So they don't really have an X, and they got to put him there. And that's the problem with this team. So they're working around that.
So I think we're in agreement then. I think final thing here is Quentin Johnston, is a hold with a lean towards really selling, to be honest. If someone really thinks that week one performance is like what you're getting from Quentin Johnston for the course of the season, I don't see it happening given Ladd McConkey and how good Keenan Allen are. So let's talk about an older player. We've been talking about a lot of younger players here, but Deebo Samuel, we saw him play again last night. Not quite the performance we saw in week one, but still working from the slot. He didn't have a rushing attempt last night, but we know Cliff Kingsbury is very willing to use his running backs in the run game, moving them around the formation, getting the motion. Like they're just doing a lot of things to give Deebo really easy looks. I thought the Packers actually did a pretty good job of trying to take him away, despite how much zone coverage they were playing last night. But Deebo comes through again in the end, and in true Deebo fashion, catches a ball underneath and shows he's still got that strength and power to basically turn into a running back, man, at that spot. And he's like, you're not stopping me. I'm getting in the end zone here. And he ends up scoring nearly 20 fantasy points. So, I mean, we got 2 weeks in a row where Deebo's out here balling. Do you see Deebo as being someone that in this scheme and the way he looks so far, being able to keep on keeping on?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a top 15 wide receiver probably in this offense.
Man, I love it. I've been getting so much flack. I'm like, this guy's he's a mid-range wide receiver too.
That's because
nobody's willing to come along the ride with me. I can't even get Matthew Friedman on board.
It's superficial because they look at him and they say, that's Steven Jackson running Deebo Samuel's uniform. That's basically what they're seeing.
But Deebo's looked like that since he got to the league.
Yeah,
that's the thing I don't get. He's gotten a little bit of weight. But
what I see is Steven Jackson running Deebo Samuel's uniform, but I think everybody else sees Eddie Lacy, like sloppy Eddie Lacy.
They do.
And you're like, dude, this isn't what you're seeing. You're not seeing it right, But I think that the way Cliff Kingsbury is very rigid about what he does. Okay. And what he does is he gets numbers. He likes to get numbers advantages pre-snap so that he can run the ball. When you looked at Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt or Bill, last week against the Giants couldn't seem to figure out that they were at a -1 to -3 disadvantage in the box on every run play that they gave the ball to Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. And when they even got within 1 at the end of the game, they blitzed a safety, and the safety was blitzed so wide in the black zone that he was like beside the quarterback when Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt decided to run where the safety came from and get 40, 50 yards on that carry. I mean, it was insane how that is. So they're very good at that, and they can give manufacture touches for Deebo that are going to give him advantageous things. And yes, Deebo can't win against press. He's not an unbelievable route runner, but he's a higher end version of Juwan Jennings in terms of what he can do after the catch, getting open in zone, and he still runs good zone routes and understands what to do. So while I think Washington may be in store for an adjustment year with Jaden Daniels' sophomore campaign, and we may see some teams be able to challenge him a little more often and this offense a little more often because they know what they got. And Cliff is probably not going to hand the reins to Jaden and go, look, I trust you to be actually the guy that we expect a star quarterback to be, because look, my nice house. See my nice house? It's because of my scheme. It's because of everything that I've done. They have quarterback envy. Offensive coordinators like him have quarterback envy, and they want to be the quarterback. Like Sean McVay, ultimate quarterback envy. That's why that's why he puppetized the strings on, puppetized Jared Goff the way he did. And then Goff ends up in becoming a good player, that people thought he could be in Detroit. So I look at this and I think that Deebo fits the brand. He is the ultimate, Mick Kingsbury, worker. he's gonna move up from the fry station and actually be able to make burgers pretty soon. And he's gonna get his. And so you got
he's
a
already
running
making
back.
the burgers. We just need him
Yeah,
to keep making them.
yeah.
We don't want him demoted to fry cook.
He might
So.
even be like in the commercials soon enough. At this level, with this, just don't give him clown paint, Cliff. Okay.
All right. Well, Matt, this has been fantastic. I have to go to a doctor's appointment, but I'm going to give you pick here. You get rapid fire 2 minutes on. Matt had 2 bonus players. We can't do both. I have a feeling I know who it's going to be. I'm hoping it's Michael Penix Jr. But if you want to make it Keyshawn Booty, you can. So go ahead. The floor is yours. You got 2 minutes to wax poetic about one of these guys and why people should be in on them in fantasy this season.
You can go look at my former scouting report on Keyshawn Butte at mattwaldmanrsp.com. So you can read that and you can see what I think of him and thought his future was going to be. That looks like it might shape up that way. But Michael Penix, when you watch that game against Tampa, if you're a casual watcher, you might look and go, that offense seemed like it was like kind of tentative and everything was bleeding out to the last second for them to figure out what they were going to do. And the motions seemed like, should we motion now? Should we stop motioning now? And like Bijan wasn't even running the ball. Everything looked stilted and crazy. But when you take a deeper look at that, what you actually see is that Tampa said, we're going to key about 3 to 5 guys on Bijan and say, you're not running up the middle with Bijan Robinson. Forget that. Take that away. We're going to play man-to-man coverage and we're going to blitz. And we're going to blitz multiple people against you. And we know that you run this offense with all these shifts, Michael Penix. So we're going to count on you to screw this up because you're basically in your rookie year as a on-the-field starter still. And we're going to make you think about things because if Kirk Cousins is whining about all this in the quarterback show on Netflix and how hard it was for him to deal with this, surely you're not going to be able to do this. Well, there's going to be delay of game penalties and things like that. No penalties. He pulled it off. He found the open man, the second and third reads oftentimes very quickly, and foiled that defense. And they didn't put him in situations where he screwed up and now he's backed up and they can just tee off on him. He took hits while he was throwing accurate passes. And on top of that, he only took 1 sack, and the only interceptable pass he actually threw was one that bounced off Vita Vea's head when Vita Vea actually somehow got airlift. So you look, and then you saw him use his legs at the end of the game, and he came 1 pass that was a little bit shy of the break path of Casey Washington from delivering the game winner that Antoine Winfield made a really nice play on. Michael Penix is for real because this was an uncomfortable game for him where conceptually they did the right things against him and made him think and made him slow down and took the offense completely out of its game plan. And he said, no, not today, boys. I can actually adjust to this. And I'm not as dumb as you think I am. And most rookie quarterbacks, you guys think rookie quarterbacks are dumb. You're not going to be able to test me like that. I'm going to come through. And he did. So this was an ugly, great performance. And I like seeing quarterbacks who can have to win with their mind, because when it does get easier and they're not facing offenses like this or defenses like this, you're going to see Warren Moon-like throws from this dude that you're going to be looking at, and everybody else who's like got the more superficial look on this are going to go, oh my God, he's got the prettiest.
I thought he played good anyway. I mean,
yeah,
he still scored fantasy points. He's scrambling around more. So bottom line, where do you got this guy for the rest of the year? Do you think he's in the top 12 quarterbacks already?
I think he's just sneaking his way in there. He's close.
Yeah.
Like I'll
borderline
take
QB1. I agree. Love it. Well, Matt, tell people where they can find your work, and we'll get out of here.
Sure. You can find me on X, Twitter, at Matt Waldman. You can find me at Footballguys. I write the top 10 column, which is a film-based review, and I show lots of film clips of what I think of those players.
Great column.
The gut check, which I've got nearly 700 of those that I've been doing over the past 20 plus years. I head the round table over there and ask the questions and edit it and put people and give people opportunities to talk there. The replacements, and then of course there's mattwaldmanrsp.com where you can find all my rookie scouting goodness and talk about development and player film and things about quarterbacking. I provide I've been providing scouting reports to quarterback coaches, to people who've coached folks like Brock Purdy
and Anthony Richardson and Caleb Williams and Josh Allen and folks like that. I've also done work with some running back coaches, and it's one of the two most looked at independent draft guides by scouts and personnel people, according to Alex Brown, who used to be the head of recruiting at Ole Miss, but he took a job scouting the Atlanta Falcons this year. So there you have it.
So the GOAT, basically. Guys, if you've not checked out Matt's work, you need to go do so immediately once you have been watching this show or listening to this show. So we will see you next week on Talk Data to Me, and we will have a data expert on and go data v data versus the data v film that we had. Going to try and keep the film thing going, so we'll have someone else on. Not going to tell you guys who it's going to be yet, but we'll have another film guest either at the end of this month or next month. I think this is something that people really like, so I appreciate you helping me get it kicked off, Matt. Hope you have a great weekend.
You too.